I woke up to the sound of rain pattering against the tent. My heart was still pounding from the nightmare that had yanked me out of sleep. In my dream, shadowy figures had been closing in on me, their whispers echoing in my ears. I shook my head to dispel the remnants of the dream and glanced over at my friends, Alex and Jessica, still sound asleep. We were deep in the heart of the silent forest, a place renowned for its eerie silence and unsettling atmosphere. We had decided to go camping here, seeking adventure and the thrill of the unknown. But as the days passed, the forest's silence became oppressive, and a sense of unease settled over us. On our third day, we set out to explore the forest. The dense canopy above blocked out most of the sunlight, casting the forest floor in perpetual twilight. As we walked, we noticed the absence of animal sounds. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of leaves underfoot. "Doesn't it feel like we're being watched?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness. Alex scoffed, trying to lighten the mood. "It's just your imagination. There's nothing out here but trees and more trees." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. That night, as we sat around the campfire, the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadows cast by the flickering flames seemed to dance and shift in unnatural ways. I thought I saw movement just beyond the light's reach, but whenever I looked directly at it, there was nothing. We decided to call it a night and retreated to our tents. I lay awake, straining to hear any sound over the persistent silence. Just as I was drifting off, I heard it. A faint whisper, like the rustle of leaves in a breeze that wasn't there. I bolted upright and unzipped the tent, peering into the darkness. The fire had died down, leaving only glowing embers. The forest was still and silent. I was about to go back inside when I heard the whisper again, this time clearer. "Come, find us." My blood ran cold. I knew I hadn't imagined it. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the tent, determined to find the source of the whisper. I didn't wake Alex or Jessica, not wanting to alarm them unnecessarily. I followed the sound deeper into the forest, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The whispers grew louder, guiding me. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in shallow gasps. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I fell into a hidden pit. I landed hard, the wind knocked out of me. The flashlight slipped from my grasp, its beam flickering before going out. I was plunged into complete darkness. Panic set in as I struggled to get my bearings. I felt around, my hands touching cold, damp earth. The whispers were all around me now, louder and more insistent. "Find us. Free us." I crawled forward, feeling the walls of the pit. My fingers brushed against something cold and hard. Bones, human bones. My heart raced as I realized I had stumbled upon a mass grave. A hand grabbed my ankle, and I screamed, kicking frantically. The grip was strong, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into the pit. Desperation fueled my struggle, and I managed to break free, scrambling back to where I had fallen in. I clawed at the sides of the pit, trying to climb out. Just as I felt I couldn't hold on any longer, a pair of hands reached down and grabbed mine, pulling me up. It was Alex. "Thank God," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "We have to get out of here." We made our way back to the campsite, but Jessica was gone. Her tent was empty, her belongings scattered. The whispers had claimed her. We didn't wait until morning. We packed up what we could and fled the silent forest, vowing never to return. The whispers still haunt my dreams, and the memory of that place lingers like a shadow on my soul. We were a team of 6. sent to investigate a long-abandoned military outpost in the Alaskan wilderness. The journey to the outpost was treacherous, with blizzards and ice storms slowing our progress. By the time we arrived, we were exhausted and on edge. The outpost stood as a frozen relic of the past, its buildings covered in a thick layer of ice and snow. It had been abandoned decades ago under mysterious circumstances, and our mission was to uncover the truth. Our first night at the outpost, we set up camp in what had once been the main barracks. The cold was bone-chilling, and the wind howled outside, rattling the old windows. As we settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. The next day, we began our investigation. The outpost was eerily silent, the only sound our footsteps crunching in the snow. We found old documents and equipment, but nothing that explained why the outpost had been abandoned so suddenly. As night fell, we gathered around a small heater, trying to keep warm. The wind outside had picked up, and the temperature had dropped even further. We took turns keeping watch, but exhaustion soon overtook us, and we all fell asleep. I awoke to the sound of whispering. At first I thought it was my teammates, but when I opened my eyes I saw that they were all still asleep. The whispers were coming from outside the barracks. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously opened the door. The wind immediately whipped snow into my face, but I stepped out, determined to find the source of the whispers. I followed the sound to a building on the edge of the outpost, the old communications center. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and I stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls. I followed them down a narrow hallway to a room at the back of the building. The room was filled with old radio equipment, covered in dust and ice. In the center of the room was a table with a large, leather-bound book on it. The whispers seemed to be coming from the book itself. I reached out and touched the book, and the whispers stopped abruptly. I opened it, revealing pages filled with strange symbols and writing in a language I didn't recognize. As I flipped through the pages, a sense of dread washed over me. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the room grew unbearably cold. I tried to move, but my body was frozen in place. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, filling my mind with terrifying images. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear. Eventually, the whispers stopped, and the temperature returned to normal. I grabbed the book and fled back to the barracks, my heart pounding. When I returned, my teammates were awake, looking worried. I showed them the book, and we decided to leave the outpost immediately. Whatever secrets it held, they were better left buried. We made our way back to civilization, but the journey was even more treacherous than before. One by one, my teammates began to disappear, claimed by the icy wilderness. By the time I reached safety, I was the only one left. The book still haunts me, and the whispers echo in my mind. I know now that some secrets are meant to stay hidden, and some places should never be disturbed. Our boat had capsized in the storm, and we had washed ashore on a remote island. There were 4 of us: me, Sam, Lily, and Mark. We had been on a sailing trip looking for adventure, but we found something far more sinister. The island was covered in dense jungle, and an eerie silence hung in the air. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant crash of waves against the shore. We had no choice but to explore the island and look for help or shelter. As we ventured deeper into the jungle, we found the remains of an old settlement. The buildings were overgrown with vines, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time. We found shelter in one of the buildings and decided to stay there for the night. As darkness fell, the feeling of unease grew stronger. We heard strange noises coming from the jungle, whispers, footsteps, and the occasional rustle of leaves. "I don't like this place," Lily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "It feels wrong." "We'll leave at first light," Sam reassured her. "We'll find a way off this island." But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. The island seemed to have a life of its own, and it didn't want us to leave. That night, I couldn't sleep. The air was thick and oppressive, and the whispers seemed to grow louder. I decided to take a walk, hoping to clear my mind. I stepped outside and followed a narrow path that led deeper into the jungle. The moonlight barely penetrated the dense canopy above, casting long shadows on the ground. As I walked, I felt like I was being watched. I reached a clearing and saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the clearing, was a stone altar covered in strange carvings. The carvings depicted twisted, shadowy figures and scenes of sacrifice. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Sam, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. "We need to leave," he said, his voice trembling. "Now." We ran back to the settlement, but when we arrived, Lily and Mark were gone. Their belongings were still there, but there was no sign of them. The whispers grew louder, surrounding us. "We have to find them," I said, my voice shaking. "They can't have gone far." We searched the jungle, calling their names, but there was no response. The island seemed to be playing tricks on us, leading us in circles. As the night wore on, our hope began to fade. We returned to the settlement, exhausted and terrified. As we entered the building, we saw Lily standing in the doorway, her eyes vacant and her skin deathly pale. "Lily," I whispered, reaching out to her. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked into the jungle, disappearing into the shadows. We tried to follow her, but the jungle seemed to swallow her whole. Desperation set in as we realized we were trapped on the island, with no way off and no way to contact the outside world. The whispers grew louder, filling our minds with fear and despair. As the days passed, we grew weaker and more paranoid. Sam and I were the only ones left, and we knew it was only a matter of time before the island claimed us, too. One night, I awoke to find Sam standing over me, a look of madness in his eyes. "The island wants a sacrifice," he whispered, his voice filled with a strange calm. "It won't let us leave until it gets one." I tried to reason with him, but it was too late. He lunged at me, and we fought desperately. In the struggle, he slipped and hit his head on a rock, his body going limp. I was alone now, the last one left. The whispers were deafening, and the island's presence pressed down on me, crushing my spirit. I knew I had to find a way off the island, or I would meet the same fate as my friends. I gathered what supplies I could and set out for the shore. The jungle seemed to close in around me, but I pushed forward, driven by a desperate need to survive. When I reached the shore, I found a small boat, half buried in the sand. It was damaged, but seaworthy. I pushed it into the water and climbed in, praying that I could make it back to civilization. As I rowed away from the island, the whispers faded, and the oppressive feeling lifted. But the memory of the island and the fate of my friends still haunt me. Some places are meant to remain untouched, and some secrets are better left undiscovered.